Hey Giants fans, welcome to Giants Latest. I was at day 7 of training camp today, so we are going to recap everything that you need to know. Let's start with this. Good news on the injury front because Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, and Wan'Dale Robinson were all back at practice today. And on top of that, they were all participating in the 11-on-11 team drills, which is very, very important. I know all of us were panicking about Malik Neighbors, so great news on that front. The second thing is Greg Van Roten, the starting right guard, was not at practice today because his wife is about to have their second child. So he's on call, I guess, at the hospital. So Dable said that there's a possibility that he might be out tomorrow as well, just obviously depending how things go. So because of that, Evan Neal got the bulk of the right guard snaps. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then one last update on the injuries. DJ Davidson was not participating in practice today, although he left practice with it seemed like a hamstring injury Tuesday, because they were off yesterday. But then today, Dable said that it was a personal issue. So I don't know what that means, but he was not at practice today. We'll see if he's back tomorrow. We did not see Cameron Scadaboo in the 11-on-11s again. He was at practice. I don't know what the reason for that is. So Dable said, or we got the impression that maybe they were just kind of limiting his snaps like they've been doing with some of the young guys, especially the rookies who had injuries this spring. But I don't know what the deal is with Cam Scadaboo. Everyone keep your fingers crossed that it's not an injury. Dable has not said anything or has not said it's an injury, and no one seems to have asked. So I'm sure someone in the media will ask about it tomorrow. So curious to hear about that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the offense. We'll start with the offensive line. So I think John Michael Schmitz is looking a little bit better. Sometimes during the 11-on-11 drills, like I'm trying to look at everything and it's hard to really zone in on the offensive line. And again, they're not fully tackling. So, if a blitz is coming in from the defense or something like that, they're still carrying on with the play. So, I will say that Evan Neal was out there at right guard, and I thought that he looked pretty good out there. He had some good snaps. He had some bad snaps. I will say I do feel like he is getting a little bit better every day, and he's getting used to playing the guard position again, which I think is just as important. John Michael Schmitz, again, I think he's been better. He hasn't had any botch snaps, but I will say I have seen a couple snaps that seem like they're a little bit high, but Russ has been able to get them, settle in, and make some great plays. So from an offensive line perspective, James Hudson is still doing a nice job. I think that until we hear about Andrew Thomas and until we see these guys actually play during preseason, it's hard to really judge what they're going to look at. But I will say that I think we should all have a little bit of optimism, especially in regards to Evan Neal, because I think he's doing a nice job. He's focused on improving. He's got the right attitude, which is a big part of it. And he does have some confidence in himself, and he has it from other players and the coaches. Jermaine Illuminor spoke to the media and said that he tells Evan Neal every single day, I guess their lockers are next to each other, that he believes in him, he has confidence in him, and he thinks that he can get the job done. So, Illuminor has played guard and tackle, so I think that's been really helpful for someone like Evan Neal, and just to feel like you have guys that believe in you, especially when, all the outside worlds, like all of us, are giving him a lot of crap. So obviously the people in the building believe in him, even though they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. So that's that on the O-line. Let's talk about some of the players who stood out today. Malik Neighbors, it was like, what injury? I don't know what you're talking about, because he caught a beautiful deep ball from Russell Wilson, and he was out there. He played the slot a little bit and had some nice grabs, typical for Malik Neighbors. Nothing to be worried about there. The next thing is Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt were both back at practice. They had some nice catches. Jalen Hyatt was in with the ones a little bit and had some great catches from Russell Wilson. So great to see him back and taking advantage of the opportunity that he was given. Some of the other wide receivers who have stood out, I think the biggest one is Beau Collins, because he's been able to get some reps with the ones, and it kind of has forced the Giants' hand at that. And he had some nice receptions today as well. He's been very consistent throughout camp. Montrell Washington is also a guy. He has stood out mostly with the twos. He gets a lot of the reps with Jackson Dart, and he's done a really nice job. Today was a great example of that he made some really beautiful catches, and Jackson Dart threw him some really nice balls. So he's someone that I think could be in competition for that 6 wide receiver role. I think ultimately it's probably going to come down to him, Dalen Cambry, and Beau Collins. Beau Collins, I believe, does have experience on special teams. I think Dable said that in the presser, which I thought was interesting. So that could obviously help him make the roster. Dalen Cambry also has experience on special teams, and Dalen Cambry got a couple reps with the ones today. Amir Smith-Marset, I think, has that fifth wide receiver role locked up and locked up good. He's a special teamer. He's a great special teamer at that, and he also looks great in the slot. When Wandale wasn't practicing, he was getting probably 90% of those reps and did a great job at that. So overall for those wide receivers, Darius Slayton has also looked great as well. But I think some of the younger guys have also done a really nice job. If you guys have questions about specific players, let me know in the comments. I will be back at practice tomorrow and do my best to get some footage or to focus in on them if there's anyone that you have particular questions about. From a tight end perspective, I didn't see a lot of Greg Dulcich today. I believe he was in more so with the twos, but I saw a really nice catch from Theo Johnson. He did a great job with Russell Wilson. Today, they were not in pads, so it was a little bit more of a passing offense than what we've seen the last couple of days when they've been in pads and they've added in the running game aspect. So today was a little bit more of that. So Theo Johnson was a little bit more involved. I saw Fedoni make a nice catch from, I believe it was Jameis Winston, and Daniel Bellinger has also been involved a bit in the offense. Now, Chris Manhertz has been mostly used as a blocker. I haven't really seen him used as a receiver, but I do think that the Giants might do that in the future because we saw them do that a little bit last year. I think mostly when Theo Johnson was injured, but I expect to see both of them on the field together. Am I missing anyone else from the offense? So because we didn't see a lot of Cam Scatterby, we saw a lot of Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy has been quietly having a very nice camp. He's done a great job catching almost every ball that has come his way. His hands as a former wide receiver have really shown up and shown up well. I know we've talked a lot about that with Cameron Scatterby, but we also have to talk about it with Tyrone Tracy. And I've also seen Devin Singletary. So because we didn't see Scatterby, there was a real rotation between the two of them today. And I know someone told me that I talk too fast, so I'm trying to slow down, but I also know that people lose interest quickly. So I'm trying to do a little bit of the best of both worlds here. And I just want to get everything that I can to you without this being an hour long. So I saw that. I made note of it. Tyrone Tracy and Singletary both looked pretty good today. I still feel like there could be a possibility where Singletary gets cut, but I still am not sold on the fact that they don't want a veteran in there. And, Tracy's only in year 2. I wouldn't really consider him a veteran just yet. And, I like Turbo. I know that they like Turbo. He's gotten some reps with the ones as well, and he's looked good. But as much as I would love to see Tracy, like a three-headed monster of Tracy, Scatterby, and Turbo, I'm just not sold that that's what they're going to do yet, but time will tell. So with that being said, let's move along to the defense. In a sense, it was a quiet day on defense because there were no turnovers, but I saw some exciting things. So I think I talked about this on Tuesday, but I want to reiterate the fact that Shane Bowen, I think, is going to look like a very different coordinator this year. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Obviously, I think the talent is the biggest aspect. He's got a lot more talent to work with this year than he had last year. So obviously that makes it different, right? But on top of that, I've seen things that we haven't really seen from him before, things that we used to see with Wink, where Wink had the linebackers and some of the corners blitzing. I saw that today. I saw Micah McFadden lined up on the edge, no one in sight to block him, went straight on the blitz to Russell Wilson and would have sacked him if it was the game. I saw the same thing with cornerback Drew Phillips. So I think we're going to see different looks from Shane Bowen this year. And I think part of it is he probably feels like his job is on the line. And I think part of it is he's like, I have the talent and I have to utilize the talent in the best way possible. So another example of that is I saw all 3 edge rushers and Dexter Lawrence on the field together. And I know there's a lot of concerns about the Giants as a whole this year. We have a tough schedule. Russell Wilson's old. Tay Banks sucks, blah, blah, blah. But I just need you to visualize, if you have not been at practice, those 4 in the front. When we look at the best offensive lines in the league, you're looking at the Eagles, the Lions, probably a couple other teams that I can't think of off the top of my head. Maybe the Ravens, the Bills. Who is stopping those 4 guys? I think even the best offensive lines in the league are going to struggle because you can't possibly block them all. Okay, you want someone to double team Dexter Lawrence? You still have 3 edge rushers coming at you. You still have Micah McFadden, who can also be on the outside blitzing. You also have Drew Phillips, who can drop in and blitz. So I think I think we should be optimistic. I also want to talk about the run defense because I know this is a big concern with a lot of people. And unfortunately, I just feel like we're not really going to get a good look at this until preseason starts. The good news is it's 1 week away. I saw Darius Alexander in with the ones quite a bit today because Dexter Lawrence was really in a rotation. Dable said that they have a plan for Dexter Lawrence and Malik Neighbors because of the injuries, and I think also because they're the best players on the team. So he's a little bit worried about just kind of throwing them in full speed ahead. So, Dexter Lawrence isn't in on every play. So when that happens, there's a real heavy rotation with the defensive tackles. Darius Alexander got some good reps with the ones today. I saw Roy Robertson Harris, Nacho, Elijah Chapman. Like the rotation goes really strong there. And again, because they're not tackling, I feel like I don't have a really good idea of who looks the best out of all those players. So it's definitely something to watch. And I don't think I'm going to have any good declarations when training camp is over. I think it's really not going to be until we see them attempt to stop a real running back from another team and blast through an offensive line during preseason. So next week against the Bills, that's going to be the number one thing that I am focused on, which I will talk about. I'll do a preview episode on the Friday before the game so we can discuss that. But so that's it with the run defense. But I think, I think it's fair to have concerns about this defense as a whole, but I think it's also fair to be a little optimistic and say, like, maybe I'm not completely out on Shane Bowen because of the talent that he has and because he's really rotating and we're seeing a whole mix of defensive schemes and plans than we've seen in the past. So I think there's reason for optimism there. The cornerback 2 rotation is still continuing. This is the first time, I think, since camp started that back-to-back days, which not really because they had the day off, but you know what I mean, back-to-back days of camp, we saw Tay Banks being the first corner starting opposite Paulson Adebo. I will say both players, I think, have done a relatively nice job. Cordell Flott was in with the ones, and he was tasked with covering Malik Neighbors, which we all know is a challenge. And, Flott pretty much went stride for him, which I think was pretty impressive. So they did call a flag on the play, but it was on Flott. I think he pushed off or something earlier. Might have held Malik before he went out on the route. And, Malik was still able to jump over his head and make an incredible catch. So, the one thing that I think we can really count on this year is that Malik Neighbors is going to be a freak and is going to destroy every single cornerback he goes against. So that's exciting. Okay, defense. What else do I want to discuss? So also one of the looks that I saw is the 3 edge rushers plus Dexter Lawrence in the 4, and then they have 3 safeties, and the third safety is Dane Belton. So I've seen that look a couple times from Shane Bowen throughout camp, and it's been most consistent that Dane Belton is that third safety every single time. So I don't think there's any questions. I don't know if you guys had any concerns about him making the roster or not making the roster. In my roster prediction, I had him going in there, and I feel very confident that he is going to end up being that third safety, and we're probably going to see a bit of Dane Belton this year. So I think that's good. Bobby O had a pass breakup in practice on Tuesday. Today they were not in pads. I think I said that already, but they weren't in pads, so it wasn't as physical of a practice as we have seen the last couple days. So, the linebackers like McFadden was blitzing and Bobby O was getting involved in stuff, but again, they're like not really tackling. So I feel like I just needed to be preseason at this point so we can actually get a better idea of what they're going to look like. But we'll get there soon enough. Is there anything else I want to talk about with the defense? I think, Art Green, I want to talk about him briefly because he's someone that's had a really nice camp so far, and I feel like we haven't discussed him a ton. So he had a beautiful one-handed interception off of Jameis Winston, but on top of that today, he had a really great pass breakup, I think when he was in with Jackson Dart. So he's a guy who has worked his way to getting more reps with the 2s and the 3s as opposed to with the 4s. Trey Hawkins also had a nice play today. I think Trey Hawkins has silently had some nice plays throughout camp. Nothing that's been dramatic enough for everyone to be talking about him extensively, but enough that I think he's going to end up making this roster. And Nick Jones, a guy who I have focused on, was a little quiet today, but I'm hopeful that tomorrow, if they have the pads back on, we get to see a little bit more from him. He's a guy that I'm really going to focus on during preseason because he's done a nice job in camp, and I want to see if he continue that. I want to talk about special teams briefly. I don't have a lot to discuss, but I realize there's one thing on offense that I didn't talk about that I need to talk about. So quickly on special teams, I saw Graham Gano. He looked great. I saw what's his name, Jamie Gillen, who switched over to number 12 because Jackson Dart is keeping 6. He looks great out there with the punts. He always booms it like 50 yards. Very impressive. He looks more consistent, I think, than maybe we've seen in the past. Let's see that continue. But last year was definitely his most consistent year, and I hope that he can continue with that this year. I saw Tyrone Tracy back on the returns. And, you know, I, I just don't want to see any of our starting players back there. I just don't. And Daboll's going to do what he wants, and he can make his own decisions. Obviously, he's going to. But I just don't want to see any of our starters back there. I don't want to see our starting running back, Tyrone Tracy. I don't want to see Cam Scatteraboo. Okay, fine. Devin Singletary, fine. But only because, you know, we have Turbo. Would rather see Turbo back there because he has that speed element that some of those other guys don't have, and he's not really a starter. He hasn't really been for the Giants. I don't want to see Javon Holland. I don't want to see any of our starting corners back there. I just think there's such a high risk of injury that it's not worth the risk. You need those guys. If Javon Holland goes down because he was on special teams, returning, when you have other guys who are capable of returning, like Gunnar, like Amir Smith-Marset, guys that you already signed who are actually very good at that, don't ever put Javon Holland back there, which I will say I haven't seen him back there since day one. But again, don't want to see Tracy back there. The last thing I want to talk about is today, for the first time since I've been at camp, Brian Daboll had a headset on during the 11-on-11s. So the question that I have is, was he just listening in? Was he making any changes to Kafka? Or is this the time now where we're going to start to see the transition and Daboll's going to call the plays? I personally hope that that's not the case. I want Mike Kafka to do it this year, but time will tell. We will see. It's going to be interesting, something that I'm also going to keep my eyes focused on tomorrow. I'll be back at practice tomorrow, and we'll be back at it with an update for you guys tomorrow afternoon. So hit the subscribe so you can see more.